I am pleased to introduce Dr. Emily Cooper, who is going to be presenting in our long program. She's medical director and founder of Seattle Performance Medicine. She has 20 years of experience in family medicine, sports medicine, nutrition, and exercise physiology. She is board certified in both family medicine and sports medicine, and she combines medical assessment, fitness, exercise, nutrition, and stress management into her routine medical evaluation and practice. In fact, it's actually something she learned at her grandmother's knee. Her grandmother was a pediatrician, and she graduated from medical school in 1914. She believed in preventive medicine. In her terminology, it was simply taking good care of yourself. She told her grandkids that they could achieve good health through exercise, nutrition, and hygiene more than doing anything else. Dr. Cooper has taken her grandmother's medical practice and philosophy to the next level. She is studying the emerging research that associates health conditions with increased body weight. She also watched the swings in her own patients' weight gains and weight loss. And today she will talk to us about why diets don't work and the science about weight gain and loss. And we'll understand two things. Weight is a symptom, not the problem, and obesity is not the patient's fault. She promises that she'll illustrate for us why you'll never want to go on a diet again. That's excellent news. And we will leave today with a better understanding of metabolic malfunction and how it contributes to obesity, diabetes, heart attacks, and strokes. So we're ready, Dr. Cooper. The session is in session.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so pleased to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm here to talk to you about some of the myths around diets and to let you know that according to the science that's available to us today, just about everything that you think you know about diets and dieting is wrong. And I know this may sound ridiculous or presumptuous, but I promise this is going to make sense. I'm sure there's been a time in your life when you've been on a few diets, or you've known people who've been on numerous diets. And you've probably, at some point in your life, said, wow, Susan, let's just call her Susan, lost so much weight. It's fantastic. And everyone at work cheered her on and said how great she looked. But then somehow, a year or two later, you noticed the weight was creeping back. And maybe it crept back plus 10 or 20 pounds. And you thought, you didn't want to say anything, but you thought, Susan isn't very disciplined. Or maybe she's just lazy about exercising. Or maybe she's just eating too much cake. Well, this is the first myth that I really want to debunk. Susan, you, and the people you know that this has happened to, they didn't fail their diet plan, the diet failed them. They weren't unsuccessful, the diet was. Susan has obesity, what the American Medical Association has recently designated as a medical disease. Susan has a medical problem. The weight gain isn't her fault, and the weight she carries is a symptom. It's not Susan's fault that she gained that weight. Just like it's not somebody's fault that they got pancreatic cancer, it's not Susan's fault that the weight crept back. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but stick with me. In the beginning, Susan's diet was able to force her body to lose weight for a short period of time. But then the complex system that regulates metabolism, which in Susan's case was filled with glitches, began to malfunction. That's why the weight started coming back. And it came back with a vengeance. This left Susan feeling disappointed and depressed, and all of her friends thinking, she really should have stuck with that diet. She looked so good. And on top of it all, everywhere Susan turned, there was another magazine, TV show, reality show, fitness guru, celebrity, luring her to try the next low carb, no carb, low fat, high protein, multi-grain, no grain diet. It was enough to drive a person insane. We live in a country obsessed with dieting. It seems like everyone is on a diet, or they're talking about a diet. And I want you to know that going on any diet just because everyone's doing it is just like when your mother told you, if all the kids jumped off the Empire State Building, would you jump off it too? No. So we need to stop jumping off the Empire State Building and start listening to what scientists have discovered about metabolism, because it's really amazing. Science shows that fixing the problem has nothing to do with deprivation or cutting out food groups. In fact, cutting out entire categories of food and depriving yourself actually makes the metabolic problem worse. And the more you do it, the worse it gets. So in other words, the more diets you go on, the worse your metabolism gets. And repeatedly dieting year after year actually leads to higher body weight over the long term in most situations. 20 years ago, I thought it was calories in, calories out, like everyone else. And I advised my patients to cut calories and stay on strict exercise plans. And some lost so much weight, and I felt very triumphant. But then, far too many of them would come back months or years later, having regained all the weight they lost, and in many cases even more. And I can't imagine how many didn't come back because they thought they did something wrong, when all they were really doing is following the plan that we had laid out. Yet they were getting heavier. And at the same time, on the sports medicine side of my practice, I saw athletes who were showing the same signs. They were developing prediabetes and gaining weight. To help my patients, I needed to find out what was causing this and why it was happening. I couldn't just put them on another diet because I knew it was a vicious cycle. So I did what I had to do when I first started practicing in rural North Dakota, and there wasn't anyone to talk to for 100 miles. I started researching and calling experts. So I read journals with sexy names like Disease Models and Mechanisms, and little did I know I would uncover a Pandora's box in a good way of science on metabolism that dated back to the early 1900s when the first research on insulin was actually being done. I dove into this world of science headfirst, and I discovered the works of hundreds of scientists who had been trying to figure out what caused type 2 diabetes, what caused weight gain and weight loss for the past 100 years. And on a side note, this information is not in textbooks in medical school, and it's not in textbooks for doctors in training. In fact, there are only a few pages on obesity in the most well-read textbook for doctors in training, residents, while there's a lot more information on bioterrorism in that same book. And I think that doctors are going to encounter a lot more patients who are suffering from obesity than bioterrorism, especially with the epidemic we're facing, where it's estimated that more than 60% of our population will have prediabetes or diabetes and be overweight or obese by 2020. As I was reading all of this information, the scientific information, I started putting together the pieces of a very complicated puzzle. I cold called a lot of the published scientists, and I started having discussions with them about what they were doing and what was going on with my patients. They were shocked to hear from me because doctors never called them. And these discussions really helped further my understanding of metabolism and enabled me to apply an even more scientific approach with my own patients. And while there are certainly similarities among patients with metabolic problems, each person is a unique individual. And that's what makes fixing these problems so complicated. But I have a fantastic community of patients who are dedicated to understanding what's going on inside their bodies. Take Kate. Her mother always called her chubby, and she went through life as a big girl. She started dieting in her early teens and into her adult life, and dieted for much of that. By the time she got to her 40s, she was disillusioned and tired of the ups and downs because nothing ever worked. So she decided to do something more aggressive, and she joined a local program at her club. And wow, the weight started coming off. She lost 80 pounds and started running. Then she started doing triathlons, then Ironman competition. And for the first time in her life, she loved to exercise. Everyone told her how great she looked and life was wonderful. And then she started noticing her weight was inching up. That's odd, she thought. Maybe I'll eat a little less and exercise a little more. And the cycle continued. She ate less and less, exercised more and more, and gained more and more weight. She could finish the races, but barely finish, and she'd be crying at the halfway mark. When she got to my office, she was so devastated, she'd regained almost all the weight she had lost. How can a person eating 1,500 calories a day and exercising 20 hours a week gain weight? What was she doing wrong? As I said before, she wasn't doing anything wrong. A simple blood test revealed that her brain thought her body was starving, so it told it to store more fat. She had glitches in her metabolic communication system. Her hormones are more than estrogen and testosterone, her hormones of metabolism, hormones like leptin, insulin, adiponectin, and ghrelin were impaired. She had these glitches in her metabolic system, so the messages to her brain that it was safe to burn fat weren't getting through to her brain. So that's myth number 2. If you diet and exercise, you'll lose weight. And Kate is not an anomaly. I see patients like this on a regular basis in my practice. Another patient, let's call him Scott, he came in to my office recently weighing over 450 pounds. And his friends and family were worried sick. They were terrified that he was going to drop dead any minute from a heart attack or a stroke. They were really at their wits' end and didn't know what to do. And Scott, he couldn't stick with a diet, and he was ravenous all the time. And on the surface, if people looked at him, they'd think he was terribly unhealthy. But that's another myth. Just because someone's overweight or obese, it doesn't mean they're unhealthy or even unfit. In fact, Scott's blood work showed that his cholesterol was in the normal range, and his blood pressure was also normal. And they were actually both in the optimal part of the normal range. He didn't have diabetes, and he didn't even have prediabetes. He was obese, but he was healthy. I have so many patients who come in complaining of weight gain, but they can ride their bicycle from here to Vancouver and back, and some of them are more fit than my normal weight patients. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. All you have to do is look at their fitness test results, and you'll see. That's what I love about this. It's not my opinion, it's the science. Here's another myth. Banish carbohydrates for life and you'll lose weight. Well, you will lose weight at first, but the truth that no one talks about is that the weight you're losing is mostly water. And that's why you lose weight fairly quickly. You're depleting your muscles of water. In fact, for every 10 pounds you lose, 6 to 7 is water. And the weight regain after low-carb diets is faster and more pronounced. And remember when I said the brain is the CEO of the metabolism, the brain operates only on carbohydrates primarily. So researchers have found that when we're eating adequate carbohydrates, our brain works better. We have a better mood, our focus and concentration is better, our memory is better, and as athletes we can go faster. And when we're on too few carbohydrates in our diet, the opposite occurs. We lose focus, our memory's poor, we become sad and irritable, and our athletic endeavors don't go as well. And in men, especially athletic men, the testosterone levels fall. So maybe that piece of bread is looking better now. So you might be asking, why is it that some people can eat anything they want and they never gain any weight? And then other people are so unlucky that if they even smell a donut, they'll gain 5 pounds. Well, it really is metabolism. That's why. Some people, unfortunately, are born with a predisposition to weight gain that's abnormal weight gain. And maybe it's just their genes, or it's the environment, or it's a combination of the two, which is usually the case. So if you were a low birth weight baby, you were already starving at birth. So your system could be prone to these types of problems. Or if your mother took the medication called DES, which was given to pregnant women in the 1950s to 1970s, you could be dealing with problems as an adult. Or if you've got family history of diabetes, your metabolism may become impaired. And certain medications can definitely trigger metabolism problems. And diets, of course, contribute tremendously to these problems, especially chronic dieting. And these are just a few of the reasons why people would have impaired metabolisms. And it can hit early in life or it can hit later, and like any disease, you just never know when it will strike. When Lily came to my office, she was a sweet, round-faced 9-year-old girl wearing a pink tutu. And her parents were really concerned because even though they had her enrolled in a diet boot camp since the age of 8, and she was exercising an hour a day, 6 days a week, she was still gaining weight at an alarming rate. And she was actually in an obese category that was an extreme obese category when she first came. Lily confided in me and she told me that she was always hungry and that she had actually been trying to diet since she was 4 years old, but it never worked. She would lose a little weight and it would always come back. I told her, it's not your fault. Her blood test revealed that she had insulin resistance and leptin resistance, 2 conditions that cause glitches in the metabolic communication system, causing the brain to become blind to the body's fat stores and only permitting the body to add fat, not subtract it. Lily's genes had really dealt her a bad hand. And since she was only 9 years old, we couldn't really use a lot of the medications that are available to help treat her condition. So we had to start slowly. She continued to gain weight and her insulin resistance remained strong, but she didn't develop diabetes and her cholesterol stayed in normal ranges, both conditions that she was at risk for. Our main goal was to keep things under as much control as possible as she went through puberty, where the hormones really do get further out of control. By the time she was 12, she was almost 300 pounds. But we were able to implement a more aggressive medical intervention. And at that time, her weight stabilized and stopped going up. And I'm happy to say that at 13, she's losing weight steadily now. And it will take her years to reach a more normal weight, but she's certainly not on that runaway train. Like so many of my patients who started out like Lily, I have an adult patient now who her blood work shows that her brain thinks that she's completely starving and malnourished, even though her body mass index is 64, which is very high, and her body fat percent is nearly 60%. She went on her first real diet, she says, when she was in 3rd grade, and then proceeded to go on 32 diets, all prescribed by physicians, over the coming years, as well as additional diets. She was on everything from cabbage soup to the grapefruit diet to medically supervised fasts. And some of them she lost 100 pounds, but it always came back, and then some. In fact, she was at her highest weight of her lifetime when I saw her. And she actually thought I was going to prescribe another diet, when what she needed to do is stop dieting. Most people think that bariatric surgery is the magic fix that's going to solve their problem permanently. And while bariatric surgery can be very helpful in certain situations, it doesn't usually fix the weight problem permanently because it doesn't repair the underlying metabolic problem completely. And patients are instructed to follow very low-calorie diets and exercise at least an hour a day for the rest of their lives. So eventually, the brain interprets this as another deprivation diet, and the weight starts coming back. I see so many people that are in shock that after surgery, their weight's coming back when they've even dialed things up. They're maybe eating 1,000 calories a day, they're exercising now 2 hours a day, and their weight is going up. And it's not their fault. Their hormones are just in a protective mode, and it's not fair. And in order to treat them, we do have to find the underlying cause of their problem. So another myth busted, gastric bypass surgery is often not the perfect answer to reversing obesity forever. So all patients we've talked about were suffering from hormone imbalance that could cause their weight problem and did cause their weight problem. The brain and body communicate through a feedback loop where the hormones are the messengers. And this feedback loop regulates our metabolism and our appetite. So glitches in this system cause weight gain and irregular appetite, a situation that I call the metabolic storm. The diets don't fix or cure that underlying problem. And they, in fact, eventually lead to additional problems and additional perception in the brain of starvation. I call that diet fog, and scientists refer to this as diet-induced defense of body weight. It's hormone settings that leave a lasting fingerprint that says, I'm starving, store more fat. The good news is that diagnosing and treating the underlying cause of these metabolic problems is possible with the science available today for most people. And that's very, very exciting. And the science of metabolism is so vast that it spans over 100 years. The science is growing at such a fast rate that we can't even think about presenting it fast enough. And there's so much misinformation in the meantime about diets, dieting, obesity, diabetes, that I decided to start a nonprofit foundation called the Diabesity Research Foundation. And our mission is to focus on practical research and educate people about the science of metabolism like we're doing here today. I hope that when people understand how metabolism really works, they'll know why diets don't work. And they'll stop focusing on the next fad diet and start putting their attention to the science that we've accumulated over the last 100 years. And the science really holds the hope. Obesity is a difficult but treatable medical condition, and the role of hormones is crucial and too complex for a talk like this today. But we start with cutting out all diets and then apply science. Thank you. Yeah. I can take some questions? Or? Okay. One question? Okay. Yes?
Could you clarify the difference or benefits of energy drinks versus sports drinks and how those two intersect with athletic performance?
Well, athletic performance, the main goal is that you have, that's a different topic really, but with athletic performance, you just need to keep your body fueled consistently with carbohydrates, and it has to be in the right balance with fluid, with water, because people make mistakes and their stomach gets upset. And there are some real formulas for that. It should be a 6 to 8% solution with carbohydrates to fluid. And really, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference where those carbohydrates come from for sports performance, as long as you're really getting them consistently for any workouts that are an hour or longer.
I would like to know how you're going to deal with maybe 200 people calling you for an appointment.
Anyone else? Thank you. Thank you.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.